except on a larger scale. It's just totaled. Now, the farmer watched helplessly as he lost everything except what matters most.
Let's look what's over here.
It's all that's left of Dean Schneider's dream. He spent 5 years building up his family dairy farm. In minutes, a tornado tore it down. Dean and his sons, Chad, 13, and Matt, 11, were wrapping up chores when the sky turned black.
There was nothing we could do other than we had to get Matt. He was on the other side of the barn. I didn't want to leave him over there alone. Went around and came in over there on the other side of the barn.
They got out of the truck and laid down next to some concrete blocks.
All of a sudden the doors blew off, went by us, and then parts of the barn, then cows ran by us. We actually saw a cow fly by us in the wind. Pieces of everything were flying by us.
It was scary. Kind of tin was flying all over and other stuff.
All 3 were injured, but alive. The $1 million farm in ruins.
I don't think there's anything salvageable here.
He's looking for his wallet.
But in the midst of destruction, small miracles. A farmhand finds his wallet. And there are much bigger miracles, too.
I was just glad that the 2 boys were alive, you know, and I'm waiting for tonight where our whole family maybe can get back together and just sit in the house and be glad we're all together again.
Now, the farm buildings will be insured, but there is some question as to how many of his 500 cattle will be. He's still trying to decide if he's going to rebuild tonight. Reporting live from St. Peter, Lindsay Paulo, Channel 5 Eyewitness News.
We, of course, are continuing to monitor the damage caused by the tornadoes. Watch Eyewitness News Morning for updates on the injuries, the cleanup, and all the phone and power outages.
Let's go to Dave Dahl. I want to ask you a couple of things I think are on people's minds. First of all, does this have any relationship to El Nino? And in any way, would it be a predictor for our upcoming tornado season, since this is so early in the year for us to have this kind of activity?
We have had those questions quite a few times, Chris, and El Nino may have had something to do with the fact that we're getting these storms up fairly early in the spring season. It's a very active one. I think that's going to come true. Whether or not we can connect that with the summer season, I don't think the past, when we've had El Nino events, has brought any connection to the summer. However, it is a very active spring, and that's a very good question. A lot of people are concerned about that. Now the concern is rain is headed the way toward many of those areas that are still picking up, and we could have that changing over to snow as well. And of course, that will hamper all the cleanup efforts throughout much of southern Minnesota. Right now, not much rain showing up on Doppler Radar 5, but a little sprinkle activity still in the far southeastern corner and around La Crosse. The current conditions out at the airport.
Part lives while crews try to restore power for thousands who have lost almost everything. WCCO 4 News starts right now.
Proud to serve the heart of the Midwest. This is the hometown team, WCCO 4 News.
Home video tells the story. The March twisters cut a swath 1.25 miles wide, the worst destruction by winds in a decade. Businesses as well as homes crushed, walls gone, interiors and lives exposed. Cars that weren't crushed were tossed around like toys. Victims, their early futile attempts to make things better. Even the fields of play were destroyed. Bleachers bent like coat hangers. Livestock with no place to hide, dead. Once glorious concourse of the old Main at Gustavus, lined with 100-year-old trees, gone forever.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Don Shelby in the stricken town of St. Peter, Minnesota.
And I'm Amelia Saxonello in our studio in Minneapolis. We have live team coverage tonight of the spring twisters that slammed into Minnesota.
We are standing here at what used to be a gymnasium where about 6 or 7 generations of St. Peterites were playing basketball. They would probably have loved to have watched that game tonight on television, but those people who would like to have watched it in the comfort of their own homes, so many of them don't have homes. Those that do are busy helping their neighbors. Those that do would not have a television set that's working because this town is blacked out tonight. There is no power down here in St. Peter. There is no power in much of this area that was stricken by those several tornadoes that came through this area. 2 people now have died as a result of the twisters. We told you, of course, earlier about the young boy that died, but the thousands of homes have been damaged or destroyed. The destruction's so bad that students at Gustavus Adolphus College in St. Peter may not be able to return for spring break for weeks and weeks. One man took pictures of the tornadoes as they came through, as they rolled through St. Peter and the other cities along the Minnesota River. He stepped out of his home in the farming area near New Ulm and took these pictures of the twister. You can see the storm is about a mile, perhaps a mile and a quarter wide. The man shot this from his backyard, and then moments later he and his son had to run to the basement to take cover. They returned a little later to take pictures of the hail falling into their yard. Well, the temperature now is in the 30s. I would guess the low 30s right now. The wind gusts down here are up to around 15 miles per hour, making it a very chilly night. Those people who are trying to put their lives and homes back together have gone inside or gone to the shelters to try to find some kind of warmth. Today, they were very, very busy with themselves, trying to get things back together. On their faces, they showed no sadness. They seemed to have work ahead of them. But as my colleague Mike Walsher pointed out earlier today, 3 weeks, 4 weeks from now, the pain and the grief will begin to really set in. The best place to see what happened is from the air.
A bird's-eye view from high above in St. Peter. One block of homes after another reduced to rubble. Century-old homes, nothing but a memory. The famed Gustavus Adolphus church spire toppled. The KRBI radio tower, no longer.
Inside, the living room is the worst, right in here, because there's glass, everything off the walls, my stuff is all over.
The tornado then ripped through a mobile home park in Le Center, leveling everything in sight. It flipped semi-trailers, scattering some into fields. The wicked twister finally settled in Lonsdale, destroying more than 10 buildings in a blink of an eye.
We came flying out of the house to make sure them guys were all okay. In a matter of 3 minutes, it was gone.
We have to tell you that an 85-year-old man who lived in rural Hanska, who was injured when the twister hit late yesterday afternoon, has died of his injuries. The second victim who died was just 6 years of age. Dustin Schneider was killed when the force of one tornado literally sucked him right out of the van in which he was riding and dropped his body 150 yards away. Here in St. Peter, a man was simply walking down the street, not very far from here, in fact, just on the other side of this gymnasium, when a part of that building fell on top of him. He says he screamed for help for more than 3 hours before being rescued.
When I was screaming for 3 hours, one of the paramedics or somebody from town there heard me and started coming over and said, "You need help down there?" I said, "Yeah, I'm buried." They started undigging me.
The ordeal wrecked Ricky Ham's shoulder, and he has some bruised ribs, but otherwise he's going to be okay. People around here consider him the luckiest man in St. Peter tonight. Among lucky people, those people who make their own luck, a group of people out in the rural part of Minnesota. Esme Murphy found a family who did everything right to save their own lives. Esme?
Well, Don, this is a story of survival. We were 10 miles south of New Ulm in the farming country there. And if you've seen the movie Twister, you may recall the unbelievable scene of a cow being picked up by the tornado. Well, at this farm near New Ulm, celluloid met reality. This is what it looked like in the movie, a cow hurtling overhead along with all the other debris. But for Dean Schneider and his two oldest sons, life imitated art.
And pretty soon all the pieces of the barn came by, and I literally saw a cow fly by, blow by.
The Schneiders were way out in this field when they saw the twister coming. They were hoping to make it to this bunker for safety, but they couldn't. So instead, they had to cling to these bricks, hoping they'd make it through.
Then we knew we were in trouble.
As the three huddled against the bricks, the tornado chewed up and spit out their dairy farm. It was then they saw the cow fly, and Dean wondered if this was it.
That's when stuff started to hit us.
Schneider suffered a gash to his head, Matt a minor neck injury and scrapes. Miraculously, Matt was barely hurt. 70 of their cows were killed. Their farm is destroyed, but they are grateful.
Somebody was looking out for us, because there's no way we should have made it, like that.
Actually consider it a miracle that they survived the 200-mile-an-hour plus winds in that farm field. Terrible damage, Don, south of New Ulm, and this family was very, very lucky to get out alive.
Thank you for bringing us the story, Esme. Utility crews throughout this area, as they always do in situations like this, are just working double duty trying to get the power back on. They are all over the place down here, struggling to get power back to thousands of those people without power. These workers were in the town of Cortland tonight. All of the electricity is out in the towns of Comfrey and St. Peter right now, and the crews aren't sure when much of that will be back on. And because of that, police patrols are all over the place down here. The National Guard is surrounding the town of Comfrey. They're here in St. Peter as well. They're working to keep the streets safe here. About 120 National Guard troops are in this city. They're working security, helping with traffic control. Governor Carlson, of course, cut his trip to Washington short and flew straight back here to his state to survey the damage. He was in the town today in St. Peter working with many of the town's folks. He'd come here to see the damage for himself, and he told tearful residents who came along with him that he knows how hard it is, but Minnesotans will be here to help, he said. Carlson deployed the National Guard last night, and he also declared the area a disaster area, which, of course, jump-starts that process to get the national disaster declaration down here so folks can start getting some needed money and get FEMA trailers down here to help them out. And at Gustavus Adolphus College in St. Peter, the windows were blown out of the dorms and the chapel was damaged. About 50 cars in the parking lot looked like they were just stacked up in a junkyard. No one was injured because the 3,000 students and staff were away on spring break. Classes were to resume April 6th, but the damage means that that may be pushed back for 2 weeks. Frederica Freiberg was also out and about tonight trying to make some sense out of what happened. And Fred, what did you find?
Well, I will tell you, Don, that we talked with a couple here in St. Peter who have suffered 2 big losses in just 1 year. Exactly 1 year ago, the couple we spoke with suffered a fire, and now their house has been blown to bits. And with devastation like this all around them, they are coping, like many in St. Peter tonight, by cleanup. They are concentrating on cleanup. But again, a double whammy for this couple is hard to take.
So I grabbed my wife and we got back in this corner.
And as the power went out and the crashing winds bore down, Paul and Lois Bjorklund held on to each other for dear life. When they made their way up from the basement, they saw half the house gone, the rest wrecked.
This is the front room.
And this was all new?
Yep, everything, rugs and everything was all new.
Everything was brand new because last March 31st, their home nearly burned to the ground. They had just finished rebuilding and refurbishing. How do you take it another time?
I hope it don't ever happen again.
All night, overtired and overwhelmed, the Bjorklunds are getting help from their 6 kids. But even the support of family doesn't take away the loss.
What you gonna do about it?
Walking through the ruins brings Paul Bjorklund to tears. But through the tears, there is humor, like this for sale sign on a very definite fixer-upper here in St. Peter. Now, as we were leaving the Bjorklunds' home, as in many locations here in St. Peter, their neighbors were also coming in to support them. Their neighbors were offering their whole family there cleaning up sloppy joes and hot chocolate, and they were taking them up on it, Don.
All right, Frederica, thank you. Coming up in just a few moments, I'm going to show you one of the historic treasures in St. Peter, of which there are many, of course, that may never be the same. Amelia?
Okay, Don, we'll see you in a couple of minutes then. Some people worry that one small town in southern Minnesota will never rebuild after last night's storm. The damage is so bad that folks in the town of Comfrey have been shut out of their own homes. Deborah Sherman has that story tonight.
The town of Comfrey looks like a wasteland. A tornado a mile wide not only destroyed homes and businesses and farms, but it also ripped open this grain elevator here in the middle of town and buried the entire place in debris.
And I bet within 30 seconds, the tornado was here and just about over with.
In less than a minute, the home Gwen Anderson raised her 8 kids in crumbled.
Like I said, these windows broke open and everything went flying.
And all I can think about is that
where do we begin over? And it was just a mess. And my father died 2 years ago, and I know if he was here, he'd be able to pick the pieces up, and I don't know if we ever will.
Many of the town's 500 residents wondered the same thing. The tornado pummeled 85% of the town. Cars, homes, businesses, a school, a century-old church.
Can we turn down here?
Well, you'll have to go.
National Guardsmen are blocking roads into the disaster and escorting people one at a time to face the ruins.
And you pretty much have to break down and cry with them because I mean, everything they had was in that building and stuff, you know, and it's just, you see it in the movies, you don't really plan on seeing it here like this at all, but it's really sad.
It feels like a ghost town. And I just hope and pray that we'll be able to put it back together again, that we can get on with our lives.
In Comfrey, Deborah Sherman, WCCO 4 News.
For a closer look at how these storms exploded around the area, here's WCCO meteorologist Mike Fairborn. Mike.
Thank you, Amelia. Our real first look today at what that tornado looked like, it was as it was coming into the New Ulm area. You already saw this a little bit earlier in the show. It's really hard to look at it with a proper perspective, you know, with those trees in the foreground and everything, but a mile wide at the base coming at you, it would just be hard to imagine that there would really be a storm that could be that big that would be bearing down on you. But that was the first look at the tornado from some amateur home video that we received. You know, we measure tornadoes not only by their size, but by their destructive capability. And from what we heard from the Weather Service, they were rating the one in St. James and St. Peter at about an F3. That's a strong tornado. Look at that. Winds of up to 206 miles an hour. I wouldn't doubt what maybe some areas maybe even experienced an F4 tornado. What we had was several tornadoes moving all the way from the Comfrey area up to the Lonsdale area, and several touchdowns from those tornadoes. Very typical of what we call a supercell, a single storm with a number of tornadoes in it.
Okay, Mike, we'll see you in a couple of minutes for the full forecast. Many of you have called to ask how you can help these victims. So here are two important hotline numbers. Both the Red Cross and the Salvation Army need money. The Red Cross number is 1-800-HELP-NOW. The Salvation Army is at 612-566-2040. Now, one aspect of the story we didn't expect, there are a high number of bald eagles and other raptors bunched up in the Minnesota River Valley on migration. Many are hurt. We're going to have more on that just ahead. We'll also go back to Don for a look at how some of the historical buildings in St. Peter fared. For more on the historical buildings that are badly damaged, let's go back to Don Shelby, who's in St. Peter. Don?
Thanks, Amelia. You know, St. Peter has welcomed Roman Catholics to the city here on the banks of the Minnesota River ever since the first French-Canadian voyageurs and the fur trade started moving up the Minnesota, called even then the St. Peter River. And for about almost a century, the people of Roman Catholic faith have called St. Peter's Parish home, and that was a church that was extremely hard hit by these twisters.
She was a beauty when she was built, designed by the same architect who dreamt the Basilica of St. Mary's and the Cathedral of St. Paul. The twister toppled the stone cross atop the church and then performed its devilish trick of unequal pressure and blew out the hand-painted stained glass windows. A fellow from Kasota, who's in that line of work, came by to salvage what was left.
Silver stain in here. It takes years and years of painting every day to be able to paint a face like that in glass.
Inside, the church was unable to provide sanctuary for herself. They might be able to save the huge pipe organ, but only if they work quickly.
The parish had hopes of restoring this place this summer. It was built in 1911 and withstood all manner of storm and flood, but apparently nothing as bad as you saw last night. The structural engineers came in and did a survey. They had high hopes of maybe being able to rebuild this place, but she may be hurt too bad for that.
For 80 years, St. Peter's Roman Catholics have gathered here to find strength. Now the church will need them to shore her up. And the faith that one day this house of God will once again be a shelter from the storm.
The churches were hit hard here. Hit hardest of all, of course, were the trees. Anybody who's ever been to St. Peter knows and loves the trees. Almost all of them are gone. Amelia?
Don, you have covered tornadoes in your career. How does this compare to the other ones that you've covered here in Minnesota?
I was able to see from a distance the Xenia, Ohio tornado. It was worse than this. I did not see the Anoka tornado. I know it killed more people, but I think this one will go down in history as the one that has done the most property damage in the state. It is as bad as anything I've seen. It looks like a war zone.
Okay, Don, thank you. And Mike Fairborn will be back with the forecast right after this.
proud to serve the heart of the Midwest. This is the Hometown Team, WCCO 4 News.
Hello, I'm Don Shelby. Amelia will join us in St. Peter in just a moment. The spring twisters were bad enough, but now there's cold, damp weather and the possibility of snow, quite a little bit of it. The big concern tonight for the people down there is hypothermia. Temperatures are in the 30s now, and most tornado victims are without any kind of power. FEMA officials are now in the area to estimate damage. All of the highways in St. Peter are closed. Too much traffic yesterday slowed down the cleanup process. About 130 National Guard members are on active duty in Comfrey and St. Peter. Some are staffing those roadblocks. 2 people are dead because of the tornadoes. A 6-year-old boy and an 85-year-old man. And 2 other people are still hospitalized in the critical care unit. We have a team of reporters covering this story. We want to begin with WCCO's Amelia Santinello live in St. Peter. Amelia.
Well, Don, as you can see behind me, I'm telling you the weather down here is just not cooperating. It is rainy, it is miserable, it is cold, and many of the homes here still do not have heat or windows. But the cleanup effort does continue, and the town is looking a little bit better than what we showed you yesterday. The streets are slowly being cleared of downed trees, power lines, and general debris. And for more on how the recovery is going, our team coverage continues with WCCO's Bill Hudson, who is in another part of St. Peter. Bill?
Well, you said it right, Amelia. It is an absolutely miserable day to be doing this type of cleanup after this horrible, horrible tornado, but this kind of work has to go on. It's imperative because the sooner that all these trees get cleared out of the roads and the power lines can be put back up, the sooner that heat can return to those homes which are still habitable, and the hundreds of other homes can be rebuilt. Strong winds and cold rain are making a difficult task all the tougher. But with 60% of all power lines down, warmth will only return when the electricity's back on.
It's got to get done sooner or later, so regardless of what the weather's like, you know, it's got to get done.
That can-do attitude is seen all over St. Peter, patching leaky roofs with tarps and putting stoplights back up. Driving rain didn't keep teams of high school students from doing their part.
Rain, snow, slush, sleet, hail.
Is it miserable?
It is. It's miserable.
This isn't the kind of weather most would choose for a moving day. But tornadoes don't give you choices, only big problems to deal with.
It's leaking through the roof up there. As you can see, but our chimney flew off, so we got a big hole in there. Now our carpeting inside is getting soaked and wet.
Across the street, rain couldn't dampen the spirits of Tom and Lynn Bonet. With their home a total loss, they'll start over, and a settlement check for $125,000 will surely brighten an otherwise dreary day. Now, we saw an awful lot of people today that were out without rain gear, and that's one of the things that health experts down here made a point of it, a news briefing this morning saying that they are very concerned about hypothermia because when the body gets wet, it draws the heat out of the body so much quicker, and with temperatures now down in the high 30s, low 40s, a very bitter wind, about a 30-mile-an-hour northwest wind blowing, people are going to be working on adrenaline, not realizing that they're losing body heat at a dangerous level. They just restored power to the local hospital here. They also have a clinic that has auxiliary power, and they say the last thing they need, Amelia, is to see a rash of hypothermia cases come in. So they're cautioning everybody, please, if you're going to be out doing the kinds of work that is so necessary right now, dress in appropriate foul weather gear.
Yeah, you're right about that, Bill, and I know that they're also concerned about people returning to their homes and trying to stay at their homes. They are warning those people, and they're asking them to stay at local hotels or even at the hospital. Now, if you ever wondered what a tornado looks like coming directly at you, take a look at this incredible home video. Roy Yanni, who lives just south of New Ulm, captured the funnel cloud on this video, and you can see that the storm is about a mile wide. Seconds after shooting this video, he and his son ran to the basement for cover. And after the tornado passed, they shot video of the golf ball-size hail that landed right in their yard.
It was incredible size. I saw a couple other tornadoes from a distance that were a lot smaller than this one. This one must have been at least a mile from front to back.
Now, if you have some home video and you'd like to share it with us, you can call this number on your screen right there, 333-WCCO, and then just press the number 1.
When disaster strikes, Minnesotans are very quick to lend a helping hand. Now, we saw evidence of this up north when the Red River flooded, and we're going to see it now following Sunday's tornadoes.
We had to walk about 3 blocks before we found a spot to actually work because there's so many people already working.
Katie Romstead and other students from Mankato State braved the heavy rain to help clean up neighboring campus Gustavus Adolphus.
Could have just as easily been us.
We have a lot of friends in St. Peter, you know, because we're really close with everybody here. And, you know, we're helping a lot of people who probably wouldn't have a lot of help otherwise.
3 busloads of high school students from Mankato West teamed up and used their muscle power.
These ladies, their house is pretty much done.
There are some volunteers that eat here, but mainly it's for people that they can come in, they can get food, they can get clothing, they can get blankets, they can take food home with them.
And there is a system to this mad rush of volunteers. They're bused from the edge of town and then check in at the volunteer center.
Once they get here, they sign in and then they receive their assignments. And we're sending out crews to different areas where we've found out that they need the greatest amount of help.
Now, if you would like to volunteer up here in St. Peter, you can call a tornado hotline. The telephone number is 1-507-931-6800, and the extension is 263. It isn't just people here in St. Peter who are trying to rebuild their lives. Several surrounding communities are also hit hard by the twisters, including the town of Comfrey. Now, that's just southwest of St. Peter, and WCCO's Mike Walsher just came back from there. Mike, how are the folks there coping?
Well, they're still in shock, Amelia. Their town was virtually wiped out. The wrath of nature destroyed Comfrey on Sunday. The damage you see here in St. Peter would be fairly typical of that entire community of 500 people. And today, the bad weather returned, just as people were allowed back in to try to salvage their personal belongings.
Well, let me know if you can find anything.
Wind-whipped rain and sleet soaked Comfrey's rubble and made for a soggy, miserable day of sorting through clothes and other personal items. Some residents say enough's enough. They'll leave town rather than rebuild here.
And I don't think we're going to rebuild. And my hardest part is leaving my church and my friends if I move.
So you're going to leave town?
We think so. We're 70 years old.
80-year-old LeVar Hollingsworth just moved into this house and remodeled it. Now she has to move out.
Well, it hasn't sunk in yet. It's a disaster. Unless you go through something like this, you have no idea what it is. It's just unbelievable.
Much of the activity in Comfrey today related to just this, trying to get cars and trucks dislodged from trees and from the sides of houses where the tornado deposited them.
The sign on the edge of Comfrey is just about the only thing untouched by the massive damage. The twister destroyed 230 homes and left calling cards of its violent force scattered everywhere. People here say a decision on rebuilding the heavily damaged school is the key to whether Comfrey recovers or remains pretty much as it is now, a virtual ghost town.
Most of the people here are probably in their 50s or older. It's kind of a retirement community, and everybody else drives to Springfield or Windham or wherever for their job, and I don't know if anybody's going to rebuild.
And right now, the town of Comfrey is being shut down. Everyone's being escorted out. It is a disaster area. Nobody's allowed to stay there overnight. But, Amelia, some people will be allowed back in coming days to continue with the cleanup. Rebuilding, though, is kind of a misnomer. Getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. It'll be some time before they begin to rebuild that town. Back to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike. And these are just some of the pictures that down here. We have so much more we want to tell you about and so much more that we want to show you, and we will continue that a little later on in this newscast. For now, let's go back to Don Shelby in the studios. Don?
All right, Amelia, thank you. Governor Carlson says Minnesota towns hit by Sunday's tornadoes will definitely qualify for federal money, but how much and when is still up in the air. He's sending a letter to the President of the United States asking for help.
This is going to be a long process of rebuilding. I don't want us to hold out expectations that life will return to normal tomorrow. It will not.
The governor says a preliminary damage estimate could be done by as early as Friday. We talked earlier about how cold the temperatures are in southern Minnesota right now. WCCO's Mike Fairborn is in the 4 weather station right now to let us know how long the cold snap will be around and how much snow, if snow indeed, is what they're going to get.
Right, Don, and that's our concern right now. You know, you were down there. You know how hard it is to piece together exactly what may have gone on. Reports are coming in from the National Weather Service as they continue to take surveys down there. They've still not been able to do an aerial survey because of the weather, but from information that they've pieced together so far, you know, this tornado could have started maybe as far south as Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Then it came through the Comfrey area as an F3, kind of skipped over Nicollet a little bit, not as much damage there at least as in the St. Peter and the La Center area, F3 tornadoes. Then it kind of died down as it moved through La Center and into Lonsdale. We don't really know how strong it was, but if you take a look at an F3 scale tornado, strong tornado, winds of 58 to 206 miles an hour, capable of extreme damage. And here's what we were looking at today then. Cold rain circulating around this system to the south of us, lifting northward. It looks like the heaviest band of snow is going to be to the north and to the west, but still some cold, wet rains down there, and the rain and snow is starting to move in. They'll get a little bit, but not very much. It's just going to stay cold, with temperatures probably in that area hovering right around the mid-30s overnight tonight. We'll have a full weather update for you in just a minute in the forecast.
All right, Mike, thank you very much. When the twister destroys most of a town, how does life go on? For some, it is business by kerosene lantern. That story is coming up next. Also ahead, you may have thought the cow flying in the movie Twister was a little far-fetched, but a Minnesota family saw just exactly that. You'll hear their amazing stories. We continue a 1-hour-long special in just a moment.
Actually, I think that would...
You know, everyday living becomes such a chore when a major disaster like this hits. Are the banks open? Can you buy pills? Are the stores open? WCCO's Kathy Werzer continues our team coverage by looking into the basic necessities we need every day.
Well, Amelia, a photographer, Brad Early, and I were driving along the streets of St. Peter today. We saw a hand-lettered sign on a home that was heavily damaged. It said, "We will survive," and that's definitely the feeling among people here in St. Peter. Businesses are fueling that can-do attitude. A number of them are open today, as you mentioned, adding a sense of normalcy to a very abnormal situation.
What size do you need? Size 10?
Business has been brisk at the Aero Ace hardware store.
Unfortunately, yeah. You know, it's a bad way to have a good business day.
On this soggy day, there's a steady trickle of folks needing rain gear. Batteries and flashlights are also big sellers. Clerks are working by the glow of a kerosene lantern and keeping track of the till by hand. Things are a little brighter, literally, over at the holiday store. A generator's up and running, keeping the store open. Good thing, since it's the one place to buy film, not to record fond memories, but to document destruction for insurance agents. This is also the place for diesel fuel.
Chainsaws. This is the first time I've gotten gas here. I'm just helping out my grandma because she had a bunch of trees around her house and they're all uprooted around her house. Anything? This is Rachel. Yes.
Familiar places are slowly reopening, like one of the town's banks. Tellers are doing the usual business in unusual circumstances.
You know, then they worry about the little things like an overdraft on their checking account, so they got to make a deposit. So they walk in, they're just stunned. You know, and what do you say to somebody who's just lost their home?
Are you okay? We're okay.
And folks needing medication are also getting help. One of the town's pharmacies has been filling prescriptions despite difficult times.
Well, we're just trying to take care of all the emergencies. We've had a lot of patients who lost all their medicine and the like, you know, their houses are gone. Just unbelievable.
Obviously a very difficult situation. Well, more businesses are expected to open soon. The key, of course, is electricity. And we know now that that's going to take some time because only about a fifth of St. Peter has the lights on right now. So it's going to take a long time to get back to normal, as we've been talking about. Amelia, back to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Kathy. And as you just saw, we really take so much for granted, and that was so evident when we came down here today. I have to tell you, just going along the streets here, the homes totally destroyed. It really makes you appreciate the things that you have in life. We had to run around for about 10-15 minutes to look for a restroom. We went to a gas station, walked into the gas station. There's absolutely no electricity. There are about 3 or 4 people here in the gas station asking how the owner was doing and was everything going okay. Then a man walked in and he said, "Hey, can I buy a cup of coffee?" I mean, something as simple as that there was no coffee because there was just absolutely no electricity. It's just really amazing the things that we just take for granted. Now we're going to go back to Don Shelby, who's in the WCCO studios, who has some good news from East Grand Forks and Fargo tonight. Don?
Indeed. Thank you very much. No one understands what these disaster victims are feeling more than the people in East Grand Forks and Grand Forks. Last year, they had to start their lives all over again after spring floods damaged their homes and schools, entire communities. People across the country turned out to help them. Now the mayor of East Grand Forks says it's time to give back. Mayor Lynn Stouse says a letter is going out to students today encouraging them and their families to give money to help the tornado victims. And Fargo is also helping out today. 50 generators used during the Fargo floods were loaded on a truck and sent to St. Peter. One official calls it payback time. If you would like to help the storm victims, here are the numbers to call. The Red Cross is at 1-800-HELP-NOW, 1-800-HELP-NOW. The Salvation Army is at 612-566-2040, 566-2040 in the Twin Cities. What they need more than anything, donations of money. If you would like to find more information on how to help, click onto Channel 4000, the website we share with WCCO Radio. The address is WCCO.com. You can even donate money online with a credit card if you'd like, and if you're looking for a loved one, you can also use Channel 4000 as a message board to try to reach family members. Not everyone in St. Peter lost a home. Coming up next, we're going to tell you about a lucky family who's helping others survive. Stay with us as our hour-long special on the Twisters continue.
Welcome back to our hour-long special on the Spring Twisters. Now, a few years ago, WCCO introduced you to a unique group of parents, or set of parents rather, who gave their kids a real-life education by traveling around the country. Now, as WCCO's Deborah Sherman reports, that experience is paying off right here in St. Peter.
Well, we got to see lots of different cultures.
5 years ago, Janet DeMars and Jim Arosas packed up their pickup and set off with their 2 kids on an adventure across America. They slept in tents, hiked mountains, and discovered new places. They were Rhodes Scholars, learning survival skills, skills they would depend on years later, caught in the wrath of a tornado.
Well, we've never really seen this much destruction.
Because, I mean, everything was just gone.
15-year-old Caitlin and 12-year-old Jordan are used to camping out.
When there was no lights and no heat, it wasn't that big of a deal. We got out the candles and life went on.
But they're also lucky.
So we're okay.
While the tornado destroyed their neighbors' homes, the Moroses house has little damage.
We are really in good shape. Our roof is fine. We have 5 or 6 broken windows. We have siding off the back, a lot of projectile damage.
Instead of cleaning up their home, the girls are helping others.
I'm glad that we're okay, but I feel real bad for the people whose houses are, like, real bad.
Well, it makes me feel better because I know that I'm helping somebody instead of them being homeless, that we're actually helping.
At night, they're inviting the homeless to sleep over, and they're watching people's pets.
It's hard to see people without a home.
This family wants to help all it can because they remember what it's like to survive without a home.
That's really what we wanted out of the trip and what we feel that they've gotten, a lot of resilience.
If you have something and people don't, you need to give. And that's what the lesson is here.
In St. Peter, Deborah Sherman, WCCO 4 News.
Now, the family wrote about their travels in a book, and they titled that book Rhodes Scholars. That's R-O-A-D Scholars, and there's no doubt that this disaster will provide more material for another book. Okay, the largest insurance company in this hard-hit area is State Farm Insurance, and the company tells us they believe that they'll be handing out about $9 million in claims. And there are other insurance companies of the victims here, but those victims don't have to wait for the checks. As we hear, the insurance surveyors are coming out and handing over checks. WCCO's Bill Hudson joins us for that part of the story right here in St. Peter. Bill?
Amelia, some real interesting information came out today from the Insurance Institute of Minnesota. It expects its member companies will pay out in excess of $50 million, $50 million in claims. So when you look around and you see all the decimation and the shattered dreams, there's certainly not a lot to smile about. However, there is one family we found today that, it got a bit of a brightener on this otherwise dreary day. Lynn and Tom Bonet, as you can see, their home is a total loss. It was destroyed by Sunday's tornado. So why are they smiling? Well, today, State Farm insurance adjuster Tao Chu saw the damage for herself. And with water pouring into their basement rec room, she wrote them a check on the spot for $125,000.
That's all for you.
Oh, I'm sure it will. This certainly helped.
Look, let's say this on the air. They handed the check to the right person.
If you didn't catch that, her husband, Tom, said they handed the cash to the right person. Now, the problem is there aren't any banks open down here, so they're going to have to hold on to that check. Now, State Farm tells us that it has about 3,000 homes insured throughout the disaster area, another 3,000 policyholders for automobile insurance. So it alone expects to pay out about $9 million. That's a conservative number. That could go up, however, as the adjusters make the rounds. What they're doing, Amelia, in a case like this, we saw it in Hurricane Andrew, we saw it in other major disasters like up in the Red River Valley last spring. They bring in these disaster response teams. Now, they've got assembled down here at least 65 to 70 insurance adjusters, and what they're doing is they're going from policyholder to policyholder, taking a quick look at the damage, looking at the terms of the policy on record, and they're writing those checks right on the spot. What they want to do is try to help people make their lives whole again, if that's possible, as soon as possible, Amelia.
Now, Bill, I know that you cover the Red River flooding. I don't know if you cover the insurance end of it, but from what I remember, some of the victims didn't get the check as fast.
You know, that's a lot. It's a different situation, flooding, because as you know, there is such a thing as flood insurance. If you didn't have flood insurance, a normal homeowner's policy would not cover certain damages from flooding. So it is a different situation when your home is destroyed by winds or tornado versus high water.
Okay, thank you very much, Bill, for that report. Now, we have an incredible story coming up next. Yes, you have to hear this to believe it. A family sees one of their cows fly by them, just like in the movie Twister. Stay with us for more as our hour-long special on the Twister continues.
We got cows.
They're living among us.